Last night I showed you some of that federal government and federal education department video really aimed at teaching our young people about consent and respect in sexual relations. We showed you how bad it was last night. It was dropped early today by the Victorian government. They didn't want to use it anymore, and now the feds have withdrawn it. That's how bad it was. It was just dumb communications, unclear, unfunny and counterproductive. Here's a reminder of it.
But what happens when one person takes action without an agreement?
You do, huh? Well, drink it. Drink it all.
Yeah, apparently that's about sexual consent. Let's look at these issues and how the POMs have tackled the same challenge a whole lot better with Pauline Wright from the New South Wales Council for Civil Liberties. We talked to her about some of the legal aspects of consent before. Thanks for joining us, Pauline. Important issue. People have got to understand this, but this video just completely missed the mark, didn't it?
I think that's right, Chris. Look, analogy can work if it's done well, and especially if it leads people to see a situation from a different perspective. But it's got to be a clear and appropriate analogy, and in this case, in the view of the Council for Civil Liberties, it's still well short of that mark.
I wonder how much people need to be educated about this. Aren't we talking about people ignoring a refusal of consent or not looking for consent? Isn't this something that people ought to be talking about and understanding in their daily lives with their families, with their friends, with their schools, rather than having to learn from a video when they're a teenager?
Well, I think it's really important that people do have that conversation. It should be an enthusiastic yes that they're looking for, rather than trying to impose their will on someone else. And that's what the conversation should be about. This video could have been helpful if it had been done well and appropriately, but it had all sorts of problems, Chris.
Well, somebody's been paid money to make it, our taxpayers' money. And I'll show another example of just how bad it was. If they didn't get the milkshake thing wrong, they tried to deal with sexual consent via tacos.
Consider this taco. This taco has no opinion about whether or not you eat it. It was not secretly hoping to go to university. Or was it? No, it wasn't.
Yeah, look, I don't even know what the point they're trying to make is. All it's doing is make me hungry at this time of the day. But when you talk about analogy and simple messages and trying to be a bit humorous, the POMs have shown us how to do this. They've talked about sexual consent in a video around the idea of a good old English cup of tea and whether or not you want a cup of tea. Have a look at some of that.
And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea.
They seem to have got to the nub of the matter with that sort of a video, don't they, Pauline?
Exactly, and it does the job correctly. It gives an analogy that has nothing to do with sex, but it is an analogy that talks about respect for someone else's views. So it gives those options of there's a definite no, there's a well, maybe, and then they say no. That has to be respected.
It's really good, and it's in the best of British humour because it's about a cup of tea, but everybody knows it's really about sex. And it does, apart from the issues you mentioned about whether people say yes or no and respecting that, it talks about how people can change their mind. Oh, yeah, I'll have a cup of tea, and then they change their mind, they don't want it anymore. Or, and I'll show you this example, people say they want a cup of tea, and then they fall asleep or fall down drunk or somewhat. Have a look at this.
And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea.
It's kind of funny and it's a very serious message. I wonder whether people are so silly they need the message relayed in this way, but it seems to be what the Australian video was trying to do.
I think it was trying to do that, but it just missed the mark. That message about unconscious people not wanting tea is a good message because sometimes that does happen. We see that quite often in the courts, that someone complains that someone has sex with them while they're drunk and asleep or semi-conscious after a night out. That there can't be consent in those circumstances.
I think that British video with the cup of tea and the stick figures is exactly what's needed, and the Australian government, instead of spending more money on a new video, just ought to run the Pommy one. It does the job very nicely. Now, we've talked before, Pauline, in your role in the Law Society and legal bodies, about the issue of sexual harassment and assault in the legal fraternity. There have been some reports out recently about this, the latest one in South Australia, talking about magistrates and judges propositioning lawyers and barristers during trials and the like. It's quite extraordinary. Does this surprise you and worry you?
Look, it's very worrying. In my younger days when I was a baby lawyer, it did happen. I haven't seen it for a long time, and I think that mostly it doesn't happen anymore, and I would hope that it wouldn't. But the fact that this is being reported in South Australia is really alarming and disturbing to me. And it just emphasises the need to really embrace the legal profession and the judiciary in the work that's being done with the Respect at Work report that the Sexual Discrimination Commissioner handed down a year ago. It's great to see that being listened to now and those recommendations being implemented and ensuring that loopholes are closed so that barristers and judges' workplaces are also covered by sexual harassment.
Spot on. Indeed. Thanks for joining us, Pauline. I appreciate it.